how was it working on that remake? Because obviously there's a lot of responsibility there, and Romero was obviously involved too a little
Yeah,
bit.
well, Tom, I was on his crew, and then Tom said that I could do. Tom was the director, and so he wasn't involved in the effects. That was whenever Optic Nerve was formed. It was John Volish and Everett Burrell, and me and this guy Greg Funk were the main. We had worked together on Two Evil Eyes, and then when they formed Optic Nerve, it was us, and that was their first major film, and they actually it was like a bid between K&B Effects and Optic Nerve, and Tom said whoever does the best zombie will get the job. Well, we did Gelatin, and we did Tom came up with the fake eye thing, and Tom saw that and he goes, "You guys are doing the movie." And so that's how we kind of got it. And then realized that we couldn't use gelatin because it was in the summer. I forget what, it was just too time consuming. The eye thing, we only used it on the Greg Funk zombie and Uncle Reach. We're the only two that had the fake eyes. They also were supposed to have that fake eyes, but just due to time, that budget was so tight, and the only reason they were doing that movie was to they had heard somebody else was going to remake it, and they wanted to get the rights back for the original, so that's what they were doing. They had to have an R rating, so it caused a lot of problems. We were doing all this stuff, and then it never even got filmed or it got cut. We did multiple versions of things, because you weren't allowed to, at that time, you weren't allowed to see any moving blood. If there was any blood splatter, they'd cut it out. But it could be all over the walls and all over the floor. As long as it didn't move, you could leave it in.
Well, whose rule was that?
That was the rating system. The MPAA was really strict. And then, so that they cut a bunch of stuff, and they wouldn't let us do a lot of stuff because they wanted to get that R rating. Especially when Tony Todd gets shot in the face. I had watched Heaven's Gate, and there was a lot of bullet hits in the face, so I kind of researched that, and I talked to Dick Smith, and he sent me the plate from The Godfather too, where the guy gets shot in the face by De Niro, and he sent me the plate, and the plate was like this big. I go, how did you get that under that prosthetic without, can't even tell. And so I made my plates smaller, and I sculpted them in dental wax and sent them to a dental lab, and they did, through the last wax casting process, they made these form-fitting plates that I could put on his face, and I even had little things that, because the explosive is right by his eye and it has to go down when the charge went off, so I made these little hoods and then glued them on his life cast, and then molded that so the plates were on his cast, and then I sculpted over that and did this really thin prosthetic, but they wouldn't let me put any blood in. I was going to do what Dick Smith did on Taxi Driver, where he injected the blood with a syringe in there, so when they blew open, but they wouldn't let me do that. It turned out all right, but I was disappointed in a lot of the stuff that they wouldn't let us do.